Welcome, everybody. We're here at Gateway of Tshuva. Gateway of Tshuva, our new Kabbalah class here at Temple Israel. So glad you're joining us. We're right here in the 10 days of awe when we're really focusing on Tshuva and what it means to do. You might call it atonement. You might call it repentance. But we're going to learn that the idea of Tshuva is a profound practice. And it teaches us, A, how to be our best at this time of the year to reconnect. But B, it teaches us who we really are and the impact that we can have spiritually. Because once we understand how the Alter Rebbe defines Tshuva, it connects with our true essence, which we're going to learn about today. And once you understand the impact I have doing either something positive or something counterproductive, now I'm really going to, A, be more masterful at Tshuva. Hi, guys, come on in, grab a seat. And B, be more masterful of how I govern my thought, speech, and action through the rest of the year. So when I get to do Tshuva, maybe I'll have kept those red lines that I want to have in place in a more firm way.
And we're dedicating our learning today.
And we're dedicating our learning today to its Ura Bas Beth. No? Yes. Ura Bas Beth. She should have a smooth surgery, that the doctor should be really on their game, that everything should be absolutely successful and back to complete health very quickly. Yeah, in the merit of our learning today. Amen.
Amen.
So we stopped off in the middle of chapter 1, and we're not going to go through the entire Igeres Tshuva, this text, inside like we did the Tanya. We're going to jump around to the big ideas. So I want to review which ideas we've been looking at so far. So let me just review with a little screen share for anyone that wasn't here so I can catch us up. And it has to do with the definition of some words. Oh, and here we go. So we're talking about accentuating the positive. This was the last class where we're finishing up chapters 1 through 3. And we defined a few words. First of all, tshuva, the word we throw around so often at this time of the year. It actually means return. Lashuv is to return. So we're returning to something. What it is, we haven't quite defined. We'll get to that today, or start that today. And then we learned a very spiritual definition, which is part of the second chunk of this text, which is that we have the power to return the final letter of the divine name and reunite it with the first 3 letters. And even the second letter, even the second hey. But basically, when we do tshuva, that hey of the tetragrammaton of the yud and hey and vav and hey, it has been dislocated because of who we are and because of what we've done. It somehow has been dislocated. And when we do tshuva, the Alter Rebbe says, tashuv hey from the Zohar, we're returning that hey. So the 3 letters of God's name now are fused again with that final hey, and it's no longer dislocated. So keep in mind as we're learning that this process of tshuva is not just me going to my teacher and saying, I'm so sorry, I didn't study for that test, I got a D, can we please take it over again? I take the test again, I get an A, and now I have a good record and I'm ready to go and I feel good about myself. It's not that at all. Maybe that's a part of it. But in fact, what it is because I am connected to, and I'm a piece of that divine name, I'm sourced there. When I drop my own level down, I also yank down on that last hey, as we'll see, and I can dislocate it. And so when I do tshuva, I'm not just getting myself back up to having a good record. I'm actually affecting, above the spiritual worlds, I'm affecting God's name itself and reuniting that name. So I'm returning that hey. It's incredible to think that's our power at this time of the year to do that. Second definition, kapara. Yom Kippur is all about kapara. And kapara, really, the Alter Rebbe defines as wiping away, as cleansing. As you know, I'm washing my hands in the basins in the sanctuary to clean something off of myself. So kapara is less about returning to something. Kapara is more about actually removing the schmutz that's left over from it. The schmutz that's left over. And relationship-wise, we understand this. I might do something terrible to someone, then I might apologize, and they've accepted my apology, so we're done. But maybe the relationship isn't exactly what it was like before. There's still some residue on the relationship, so to speak.
Does Kippur come from Kippur? Kippur comes from Kippur?
There's debates about the thing. It comes from an Aramaic word. There's a whole debate with Rashi and everybody else about what it comes from. It doesn't really come from a Hebrew root, but we're going to say it comes from an Aramaic word, which means washing. I don't know. I actually researched all the different opinions, and it gets complicated. So it's from an Aramaic word for wiping away. I'm going with that. That's from Rashi, and Rashi is a good source. And there it is. Kippur Zahav. I had it right there for me. That is the basins of the sanctuary were called Kippur Zahav, and Rashi says, see, Kippur means washing basins, and so you would wash your hands in these, and that's how we get the root of kapara, but it is from Aramaic. And finally, mechila. Here's a term we need to know, that is forgiveness. That is emotional, right? That is where God says, okay, we're good. I accept your apology. So same as us. It's an emotional closeness. And then we reviewed, and this is good for us to know the difference, positive and negative commandments. So the first thing we learned was, if I've done a positive commandment, if there was a positive commandment that I had to do, so eating matzah on Pesach, right? And I neglected to do it for whatever reason. Now I have to do tshuva for that. And once I do tshuva, and after Pesach I say, I'm sorry, God, I was so busy. There wasn't matzah, whatever happened. I apologize. I'm going to make sure I always eat matzah on Pesach again. That's not going to happen again. I'm sorry, right? No human was hurt. I don't have to apologize to a human. The moment I sincerely ask God for forgiveness and apologize, I'm forgiven immediately. I'm forgiven immediately. And the negative, what happens? I have to wait. If I did a negative commandment, if I say I lied, right? So I told a lie. So I apologize to the person for lying to them. Then I go to God. I say, I'm sorry. I have this holy gift of speech. We're the only species you created in the universe with speech. You created it for us to be kind and to say good things and to praise you and to help other people. And I used that gift of speech, that holy gift. I used it to say something not true. That's, against everything about Judaism and who I am. And I'm sorry. Now what happens? The negative commandment, it's put in a file and it's on hold. And I have to wait till Yom Kippur, and then we pull it out. And now the kapara happens, the cleansing happens. So if I missed a positive commandment, boom, I'm forgiven right there before I even leave the conversation. If I cross a negative commandment, now it's put on hold, and God pulls it on Yom Kippur and says, okay, remember when you told that lie? Now you said you were sorry, but here we are at Yom Kippur. Now let's get rid of the schmutz. Let's cleanse you. And so, which seems to be more severe from this?
You said
I said that.
Positive.
I said that. Yeah, but from this, right? For those reviewing, which seems to be more severe?
Lacking positive.
Negative. The negative. Negative seems more severe because it takes longer.
Oh, okay.
Right. Now that as you're saying, that Stuart, that is a misunderstanding. The Alter Rebbe will clear up. Oh, where'd you go? The second thing we learned. In practice, in Kiyum, if I have a positive and a negative commandment in front of me, and I can only do one of them, which one wins? The positive commandment wins. We said if you have to do a circumcision on a baby, and there is saharat right on the spot of circumcision, which you're not allowed to cut off biblically, now you ignore the negative and you do the positive, you do the circumcision. So positive overrides a negative. So that seems like the opposite. We have a contradiction. And we explained it by the spiritual underpinnings of both. Once we understand the whole point of both of them and the dynamic of a positive and a negative, now we see there's not a conflict, because what happens when I do a positive commandment? Light comes down. Light comes down. Right now, we're all learning Torah. Today, right now, we're learning Tanya. To us, with our physical eyes, it looks like I happen to be here, nice way to pass an hour, we'll maybe learn something, great. But from God's perspective, there's some very, very profound light that's there for each of us in terms of how we're understanding this particular text on this day, in this place, and only we can draw that light down. We're drawing it down right now. right? We learned about the Shekhinah over our head. As we learn, that light is coming down. Maybe I'm so coarse that I don't feel it, or maybe I feel a little, or maybe I feel a lot. Doesn't matter what I feel, the light's coming. Now, here's the question. If somebody else was here instead of you, would they draw down the same light? No, dude. Okay, I can understand the time, the way you understand it. I have your history. I have your feelings. I have your, God is now getting such nachas from the way you're learning Tanya, the way I'm learning Tanya, with our background, with our everything, with our, I don't understand the Hebrew and the Aramaic, and I'm still struggling, right? I'm bringing my own personal whole bag to this. And that light that's coming down, it's because I'm learning Tanya. Nobody else can sit in my place and can draw that light down. That's somebody else. That's their own light. Yeah.
So God reflects what we do. We're learning Torah and we bring down light from God. So when we do a negative and
we'll get to that. Okay.
All right. Okay.
Right. So that positive, and by the way, same thing with tomorrow. Tomorrow, I'm in a different mood than today. I'm a different person. It's, by the way, there's a different whole light creating the world. So every possibility that will come down today is contained in that kernel of divine light that is meant for today. And same thing with this spot. I'm learning here. I'm not learning in Jerusalem. I'm not learning wherever else. So we're each drawing down a very particular light that's unique to us in terms of soul, time, and space, right? My soul, this time, this space, that particular light of what the mitzvah is, that organ of God, as we learn. So no one else can ever access this light. It's a unique light. And if we miss it, if it was something that was required of us, if it was me waving the lulav on Sukkot that's coming up, now no Michael Smolash will ever wave a lulav on that day again, right? That light is missing from the universe. It's an or neder. It's, God has this gorgeous puzzle of a universe, and that piece is just never going to be put in there, right? So the puzzle will forever be there, that infinite moment, and that piece is just missing. It's never going to be drawn down. What happens when I do a negative commandment? Here's the opposite. There's no light being drawn down. I'm taking my connection to God, and I'm putting a little nick in that rope, right? If my connection to God is a rope, as we'll learn, and I'm down here and God's name is up here, when I say, you know what, I'll just tell a story about somebody. I'll just, I don't normally eat this, but I'll eat it today. Or, I don't normally use my phone on Shabbos, but I really feel like watching this video. And I just, let it slide. I'm putting a little nick in that connection with God. Or you could say I'm putting a blemish in my soul, right? If my soul is an umbilical cord, it now has a defect, a blemish. So getting back to our question, what is actually easier to do? If I take a puzzle piece out of a box, burn it, shred it, and cast it off the sea so it doesn't exist anymore, and it's a unique puzzle, there's no copy, is it easier to get that puzzle piece to go back in? Or if I have a nice rope and I spill some wax on the rope, or I put a cut in the rope, is it easier to repair that rope? What job is going to be easier? What would you rather have to do?
Repair the rope.
Right. How do you do that?
Sure.
No, I mean physically. How do you do it?
Oh.
Say a rope gets cut. Say it's severed. What do you do?
Thread some more threads on it.
Thread some more threads and reinforce it. Tie a knot. We'll learn, right? But I can imagine I can fix a rope. If I have a garment that has something spilled in it, I can clean it. I can put a patch on something. But replacing a puzzle piece that doesn't exist, what am I going to do? It's just, I can't. If we understand that, now we know why a positive is forgiven immediately and negative has to wait till Yom Kippur. Because a positive is, it's so severe, there's nothing you can do about it. It can't be remedied. It's just missing light. And no matter how many times I apologize, I can't go back and wave the lulav on that day again. It's gone. That light won't enter. And I can apologize and apologize. The light still is missing. Whereas a negative, now there's a process, there's something you can do. Okay, so now, since there's a way to fix it, we're going to put it on hold until Yom Kippur when we can really go in and cleanse this thing and retie the rope and, wash out the stain, whatever it is. So that's why a positive supersedes a negative, because the positive is actually more important. And that's what we want to focus on. We want to focus on, we're here to bring light, right? We're here to create meaning. And we shouldn't get too wrapped up in oh, I missed, I failed, I messed up, because we're human. There's a way to deal with that. And even that, as we said at the end of last class, can be turned into a positive, because in the end, when I really apologize in a relationship, I can be even closer than before. And the transgression, the rift in the relationship, if we approach it sincerely and we really make up and apologize, the relationship can be even stronger than before the issue. You look like that's never happened to you. You've obviously never insulted your wife as like I have. You've never been embarrassing somebody. You've never hurt somebody and had to be like, I'm so sorry, right?
How does the word atonement in Kippur fit into all this?
Like I said, I want to avoid the English. Okay. I like atonement because it's kind of at one. There's like a oneness in there. So I like it for the class. But when we're actually trying to define tshuva, kapara, and mechila, the English does not help us. So you know, English is its own language. Yeah.
I was just thinking that, okay, so when you do when you do a mitzvah, it's not a deed, it's a commandment, then, and there's light that's shining on you, is it then that other people that might be around you get something from that illumination, so that you're actually not just lighting yourself up, but you're lighting up part of the world? And so maybe that's why it would be more detrimental not doing something right, because you're taking away the light that would illuminate other people's path.
Yes, and it goes deeper than that, Stuart. Not only is it that they'll sense the light and they'll be inspired or they'll get some of it, it's that at our source, when I do a mitzvah, I bring light to everybody's soul, because our source is shared. Our source, we learned that, I forget the chapter, right? But Knesset Yisrael is the source of all souls. And when I learn Torah, do a mitzvah, I bring light to your soul, you bring light to my soul. So that's even more powerful when you raise that point. And let me share screen. Any questions from online? Good. So there's our definitions. Tashuv Hey, we learned about returning the Hey, as we said. We'll get to this in the class. Yes, I think we will stop there with the screen share. Let's go back into our text. So we'll finish up now on page 184. Mikol makom, this is the second paragraph. Haor nedar v'chulu. Dan, why don't we start with you and go around, Sue Ellen.
Nonetheless, the illumination which would have been drawn down through the performance of the positive command is lacking, even after repentance, so that the sin remains only partially rectified.
So that light is just missing. So we should understand when we're doing tshuva, the difference. When I do tshuva for a negative commandment, now there's a process. I'm repairing and cleansing my relationship with God. But doing tshuva for a positive that I left out, there is a way of turning into a positive that's very, very, very deep, but ultimately that light will never come back down, right? So I could just inspire myself to now do that thing in the future and just be more committed. Go ahead, Stuart.
On the verse, a crookedness that cannot be corrected, i.e., even through repentance, our sages accordingly comment, this relates to one who neglected the evening or morning reading of Shema, or the evening or morning prayer. For though...
Yeah, so just till there. So if I normally say the Shema, which this is a Jewish thing, Reformed Jews, we say the Shema in the morning. I didn't say it this morning for whatever reason. Now that light is not there. You could still say it, I think. You have until a certain time. That light didn't get drawn down into my soul and everybody else's soul, and it's missing from the puzzle. Whoever wants to go next. Andy?
For though he be scrupulous henceforth about reading the evening and morning Shema forevermore, thereby demonstrating his regret.
So I never miss another one. I'm so sorry that I make sure, and that's still Ein Shuvato Moelet Letaken Ma Shebitel Pamachad is repentance. Go ahead, Joey.
His repentance is ineffectual. It's correcting what he once neglected.
Right. And that it won't correct what I neglected, no matter how much.
Really work.
But you can't bring a light that's now missing. Right? I can't go back in time and bring in that light.
Well, Hashem can do it.
והעובר על מצווה לא תעשה על ידי שנדבק הרע בנפשו עושה פגם למעלה בשורשה ומקור חוצפה.
If one violates a prohibition in thought, speech, or action, since thereby evil cleaves to his soul, he also impairs its supernal root and source.
So here we're getting a little to the spiritual side of things. When I'm in a negative commandment and I violated a prohibition, now it's not about a light that's lacking there. It's about something negative is cleaving to my soul. And if it's cleaving to my soul, it's cleaving to my soul's root and source. And what is my soul's root and source, as we said? It is the hay of God's name. It is God's actual breath. God's actual breath, as we'll see when we go to chapter 4. So I've impaired not just my own soul, but I've impaired where my soul's coming from, within God. And here, let me get to, so let's go online. Doreen, then Ruth, then Susan, then Linda. Okay, Doreen's not going to, so we'll start with Ruth, then Susan, then Linda, then Marcia. Marcia, you want to read?
I'm passing, sorry.
Okay. Ruth, you reading? Ruth, Linda, and Marcia, when we get to you, if you'd like, let us know.
Cantor, I cannot hear anybody but you.
Oh, let me turn the mic up a little.
Where we are, I'm sorry.
Let me turn the mic up a little. Thanks for letting me, Doreen, letting me know. We are top of 185, and we're going to start the second paragraph in the Garbs. So if you'll start, I'll read the Hebrew first. Does that clear it up?
Hey, please.
Okay. And so, Bal Vushim, the Yud Sfirot, Dasiya Kmoshkatu, Petikunei Zohar, Levushin, Tikinat Lon, Diminaihu, Parchin, Nishmatin, Livnei Nasha, Vichulu.
Do you understand the Aramaic?
Well, it's translated here. But Doreen, why don't you go ahead in the Garbs?
Yeah.
Doreen, you'll need to unmute. Yeah. Should I hold on? Hey, Ruth, why don't you take the next one? I'll come back to you, Doreen.
Please skip me.
Okay. Yeah, in the Garbs.
In the garbs of the 10 Sfirot of Asiya, as Tikunei Zohar, you have fashioned garbs for the Sfirot, from which fly forth souls for man. Right, so
as Ruth said, that is Aramaic, right? Levushin, Tikinat Loan, Diminaihu, Parchin. So this is from, we actually read this in the Nusach that I do. We read this on the evening of Shabbat, that God creates garbs for the Sirot, from which forth fly our own souls. So the 10 Sirot that we've learned about, from Malchus comes, that's the source of all of our souls, and they actually come right from that, or from the hay of God's name. That's the source. And it's there that we are actually capable of creating a defect. In God's own name, we're capable of actually dislocating that hay by doing a negative commandment. Let's go on with Linda, if you would.
You want me to continue?
Linda's going to read the next one.
Okay, it's fine.
Therefore, there is no atonement for his own soul, nor above until Yom Kippur.
That's why. Because I impaired my soul's root in the hay of God's 4-letter name. Now, there's a process to repair that, unlike with the positive commandment. So there, anything that we apologize for, we're waiting until Yom Kippur next week when we can actually pull out all those files, and there's the opportunity to wash and cleanse and wipe away and have it completely gone, so that not only has God granted me tshuva, that I can return to my original state, but now when you look at my soul, it looks like it's brand new, straight out of the box, right? There's not a stain, there's not anything left, there's no damage to the material. It's become completely innocent, brand new again. And looking at it, you would never know that I'd sinned. As you said, even more so, because the connection can be strengthened. So now it's like an even more robust article than it may have been the year before.
So you have a brand new soul on Yom Kippur.
If you do tshuva. Yeah, brand new soul. That's the opportunity. Yeah, I like it too. It's nice. Therefore, what's that?
The following day is not so good, but
Got a little tarnish on.
yeah, as of that day, that's good.
You know, I heard a vort about that. He said the following day is not so good. The day after Yom Kippur. So here's a little vort. When you finish Yom Kippur, what's the first thing that you do in a traditional synagogue? You daven Mariv. Daven Mariv. Okay, you're done. You fasted everything, and then like, okay, quick, daven Mariv, chit chat. We do it. Look, in 17 minutes, Mariv is done. And we're doing the Amida in Mariv. And what do we say? God, I've sinned. God, I've transgressed. God, please forgive me in Mariv. Here's the question. It was just Yom Kippur. I've been fasting all day. I got this brand new soul. We're all here. We're all inspired. And in the 6 minutes between the end of Yom Kippur and Mariv, I've sinned. What have you been doing? You've been in a synagogue fasting. Who has time to, what Avera? What are you apologizing for? And the answer is, we're apologizing for not trusting that God actually forgave us. We're apologizing for not believing that I deserve to be forgiven, that it's possible for me to be forgiven totally, that God has the capacity to forgive me, even though I sinned every other year, even though I'm going to walk out and I know myself and I'm probably going to mess up within the next hour. I don't trust that God has the capacity to say, yes, right now you are forgiven, fresh start. And that's the Avera we're apologizing for, is that we don't believe God has the power to truly forgive us, because God does. God's forgiveness is not like our forgiveness. So never mind the next day, right? It really is, this is the real deal. K'mo shekatuv v'chipar al hakodesh mitumot bnei Yisrael u'mishpatehem v'gomer lefi Hashem titaru. And let's go back to Dan.
Therefore, there is no atonement for his own soul, nor above until Yom Kippur.
And one more, concerning
which it is written, he shall atone for the holy place because of the impurities of the children of Israel, and because of their sins, before Havaya shall you be purified.
Okay, so this sounds very nice. I'll be purified before God. So here's an image in my mind. God's up there, I suppose, and I'm here. I've come up to God's, and it's Nila, and the gates close behind me, and it's me and God, and I'm purified, and I'm forgiven before God. It's me standing before God, right? That's the basic meaning it conjures. Lifnei Hashem daika, before God is stressed. Before God is stressed. Well, we'll explain, because he doesn't really go into it here. You're supposed to understand just from this little shtickle. He doesn't mean, it's not just that I'm standing before God, as in God's here, and I'm here, and I'm standing before God. He also means lifnei, before, as in previous to, above. So something about, I'm going to be purified from above Havaya. That's where my purification comes from, not just from God's name. Because what's happened, and let me share my screen again if this isn't clear. Here I have God's name. So this is Havaya, we call it in this class. It's not how, I'm not saying it how it would be said, because we don't say this name. And as you see, God's name should be unified, but I created a little rift here, right? I got the upper hay and the lower hay, and the lower hay I've disconnected. And so how am I going to reunite God's name? To bring the hay back and erase that disconnection, you have to find something higher than the name that's capable of reuniting the name, right? If I have two ministers in the government and they're always fighting and always fetching and always going at each other, and none of their assistants can come in and say, hey, you're making life difficult. Can you please make up with the the Minister of Education, the Minister of Justice, can you make up with him because we have to work together? Forget it. You're my underling, you listen to what I say, I know it's right, and the Minister of Education is a doofus and blah, blah, blah. But when the king comes, suddenly what happens to the Minister of Justice, the Minister of Education?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And they're united, and they're both bowing before the king, and they're happy to do it. And the king says, I need the two of you to come up with this project for me for a special day. I need you to work together closely. Yes, of course, happy to do it, sir, right? You need somebody above them to come and overcome their antagonism or their rift for them to reunite. That's reflecting ultimately what's happening here with God's name. This is just God's name. As much as this is, and I'll stop my share, as much as this is this holy name, that's the most transcendent name that we don't say, that we revere, that we say during prayers, it still is just God's name, which means it's just one of God's behaviors. It's one of God's identities, and God's essence is infinitely beyond that name, right? When I say Baruch Atah, that word you, that's being addressed to God's essence. And then I say God's name, Havaya, in the blessing. The name is below the essence. So as we'll learn, for us to repair this impurity, we're actually going to draw not from the four-letter name of God. We're going to draw from way, way above that. And we'll learn what level that comes from and what it is. And because we're now drawing from Lifnei Havaya, from before God, that's the power that we're going to use in our tshuva to reunite God's name so that it's whole again, and then my soul is whole as well. Right? So when we hear this in Lifnei Ad Hashem Titaru, when we hear these beautiful settings, we shouldn't just think, I'm being purified before God like I'm some subject that's coming and having a moment before the king, and the king says, fine, Smolash, all A's for you now. Yeah, you're good. Off you go. I really am drawing something above even God's name, and that light is coming down and is fixing God's name because of my tshuva. And because of that, now my soul is even stronger than before, and it's a brand new soul ready to go. Make sense? Mm-hmm. And one other point from chapter 1. Go ahead, Stuart. Hence 186.
One should not, God forbid, infer any leniency in the positive commandments from this Bareta, which states that one is immediately forgiven after repenting for having transgressed a positive command, while transgressing a negative command requires, in addition, the atonement of Yom Kippur.
So the Alter Rebbe is now clearing up the confusion that he created with these two questions and saying, if you understand the dynamic of what is a positive commandment, what is a negative commandment, what happens with my soul when I neglect one or transgress another, now I see that in fact the positive commandment is the focus of what I should be looking at. That is the more important. And also it all makes sense. Of course, I'm forgiven right away for the positive, because how can you fix it? Whereas the negative, there's a process, it's able to be fixed, so now it takes time. It's not a contradiction in any way. Make sense? And here's one, this is something that I find very, very psychologically beneficial, but it's a leap. It's a leap for us in the Reformed community to look at this, because this is something that we've distanced ourselves from. But if you approach it with the right parameters, and it's important to have the right parameters, it can be a very, very healing perspective and a powerful perspective. And it has to do with why it is that sometimes I get these bumps in life. I get these irritations, we'll call it suffering, but we're here in North America. So a lot of times it's a flat tire or a broken little finger, and I go to the hospital and it's fixed. Like, not to minimize, but here in North America, sometimes it's delivered in very, very user-friendly packets. And we're talking about that kind of suffering. We're not talking about the big, terrible, horror. No one can explain those. So we're not going to try and explain those. When something really tragic happens, you just support the person. So I want to set the parameters of how we're going to look at this and present it as the way I use it, as a tool to really reframe what might seem like a negative in life. Seem defensive enough? Good. Hence, particularly. Yeah, so let's go on. Vifrat b'Talmud Torah, particularly Torah study. This is a big deal, as you learned in the Tanya, that not learning Torah with my available time is considered. I miss bringing in this tremendous light that's all the mitzvahs combined. So you can really you can go whole hog on that if you want to look at all the time I've wasted doing whatever, and when I could have been learning Torah. Now I'm really humbled in front of God on Yom Kippur. On the contrary, the Rabbi, and we said here, we learned the sages that God glosses over idolatry, incest, murder, but doesn't excuse the neglect of Torah study. So here, he's really putting a pin on that point, that if you think a negative commandment can be more important than a positive commandment, look that God does not overlook missing Torah study for an hour. And yet, if you murder somebody, that God can do full kapara for, right? So the very worst sins, it's possible to repair them. Whereas I had a free hour and I just wiled it away instead of learning Torah, that God can't overlook. So he's really putting a cap on that. And now we're at the bottom of the page. Avar al kretot mitot betin tshuva b'yom kippurim tolin b'surin memarkin. Let's go ahead. I forget who's reading. Stuart or Mindy? If one committed, bottom of 186.
If one committed a sin punishable by excision or execution, repentance and Yom Kippur are tentative so that the individual is not punished and suffering scour.
There it is, suffering scour. So if I've committed a big sin, it's all tentative to Yom Kippur, and that negative thing that happened in my life, that irritation, that name someone called me, that promotion that I didn't get, that stock market, bump that hit my savings, whatever it is. When I go, oh, hey, life, why are you doing that to me? That is scouring me. That is scouring me. Right? Let's go one more. Perush gomrin kapara hu milshon marika mushtifa litzachzeach hanefesh.
For example, to complete the atonement, the verb memarkin denotes the final stage, namely scouring and rinsing in order to polish the soul.
So to complete kapara, Yom Kippur is going to really clean and wash the soul. But now you want to polish it, so just shining and gleaming. And what does that? My father-in-law bought my son a rock polisher. You ever seen one of those during COVID? And you get these pebbles and you put it in, and it goes with sand. You leave it for 14 hours or something. It's this loud noise. Thank you. In the middle of COVID, and my son got really excited. I was like, "Oh my God!" It is so irritating. Just even listen to those rocks being polished, and it's like grinding, and you're scraping off. Imagine being one of those rocks. But the point is, you come out shining and beautiful. You come out shining and beautiful in the end of it. So polishing, it's actually an irritating thing because it's taking off your exterior. And here, the Alter Rebbe is saying it's the same thing in life. If you want to really finish this kapara, you have to rely on these bumps of life, this suffering of life, not the huge tragedies. We'll leave those out of it. But the bumps that make me go, oi, I could say, why me? I could say, this is so bad. Or I could say something else that we'll learn, because thank you, this is actually polishing me. Right? As it says, Kishnemar, Ki kapara hi lashon kinuach shemekaneach lichluch hachet.
For kapara, atonement is the term for the preceding stage of cleaning, removing the uncleanness of the sin.
Right, that's what kapara means. Again, we defined it. It's milashon kinuach. It's connected to wiping away. And shenemar, we'll do one more, Rick. Shenemar ufakarati v'shevet pisham uvingaim avonam.
As it is written, with the rod shall I remember their sin, and with affliction their iniquity. Right.
So when God remembers my sin, God remembers it with a rod. Right. I had I used to take Muay Thai, and we had a real traditional Muay Thai teacher from Thailand, a big champion. And he had this great sense of humor. And the advanced students, he'd walk around with like a little stick he'd pick up sometimes. And if he didn't like their technique, he'd just smack them with it. And he'd giggle, right? And we're not used to this, right? But to him, it's like, they'll remember not to stand with their foot that way if I smack them a little. And these are grown-ups. They come, it's all part of the thing. They're tough guys. They're not getting hurt. But if a teacher that really is looking out for my good is smacking me with a rod, I don't suggest it at home or in parenting, but what's he doing? He's making sure that when they're in an actual combat situation, their technique is the best. He's caring for them, right? He's fixing them. So how do we do, I set this up, right? How do we benefit from this point of view? And how do we see suffering as something that I can frame as a positive? First, let me say, the premise we have to have is that God is always good. God is always good. Everything that comes from God is good because God knows best by an infinite fold, right? So as we've learned, if I'm a child and I have a parent and the parent says, eat the broccoli, I think the parent's mean. The parent says, you need to get this shot of medicine, I think the parent's mean. And I cry and I think that's terrible. Why are they hurting me? But the parent knows better. The parent knows that the broccoli is better than the jelly bean, right? Even though I like the jelly bean, that's not goodness. The broccoli is goodness, right? And even though the needle from the doctor looks like it's painful, it's actually helping and avoiding a lot worse pain, right? It's a higher good. So to a baby, what looks like a negative actually is the higher good. When something is a level of good that the parent understands, often a baby will think that it's bad because it's above their level of understanding. Same thing happens with God. God wants to send me the blessing. God says, oh, Smolash did it again. Look at his soul. Look at the state it's in. It's Yom Kippur. I got to help him. I got to send him a little polishing this way, a little that. And he's going to be irritated about this, maybe in that, but he doesn't realize I see that I'm fixing his soul. In the end, it's going to be so much better for him. It's going to cleanse him. He's going to be in such better shape. Even though he doesn't understand it, he's that baby that's going to think, why me? Why is this happening? This is so annoying. But I'm God, I know best. I'm going to do what's good for him. And it's going to appear to him the same way a baby looking at a doctor's needle is like, no, I don't want that, right? Because I'm the baby and God's infinitely more levels above the way a parent is over a baby.
Is that the way you look at real tragedy, not the flat?
Like I said, we're leaving that out. I'm not trying to explain real tragedy. That is a different category. And that you say, no one can explain. You say, what can I do? How can I help? That's all you say, right? But 90 or 95% of what I experience in my life is, I got the wrong cup of coffee. How annoying. Oh, there's traffic. How annoying. The normal push and pull of life that can get us down. That's what we're talking about. That's what I'm working with. And a few other parameters, right? This approach, I can only use for myself. So one category is big tragedies. We're not applying to this. It's very important. Second category is this is only something I do in my four amos, right? In my 4 cubits, right? I don't look at somebody else and say, oh, that's suffering. It's fine. God's just helping them, right? I'm only allowed to do this with myself for my own suffering, my own issues. I could say, I'm getting tsuris. Thank God this is polishing my soul. If I see somebody else with trouble, my answer is, oh my gosh, how can I help? Let's try and get you out of this, right? Let's try and avoid this. So A, it's only for the everyday stuff. B, it's only for me. And C, and this is the crazy one, it's only for things that have happened. It's not for things that are going to happen, right? Things that have happened, now that's divine providence. Everything that has happened, right? My sense of emunah, of faith, should say, emunah should say, even if it looks to me like a baby looking at a doctor's needle or a baby looking at a plate of broccoli, and I say, to my eyes and my brain, my past looks like it was negative, I'm going to have faith that my parent knows better than me and that needle was actually there to help me. And everything that has happened, now that it's happened, that was what God needed to happen. It's the perfect past. It's all God's love. It's all positive, and boom. And faith can say that, even if my intellect can't understand it. Go figure, my intellect can't understand God's intellect, but my faith can posit just as a premise that everything is for my own good. And what a relief it is to try it. Just try it for 1 second at 1% and see what a relief it is. If you don't think you can do it 100% for the whole day or the whole year, try 1% for 1 second. Imagine everything that's happened to me has been completely for my own good, and see what happens. Just for that 1% for 1 second, then maybe 2% for 2 seconds. Faith. Yeah. Now what's happening in the future, that's a different story, right? So anything that hasn't happened yet, now that's a different category. Now, not only should I pray for this suffering to stop, right? God's commanding me to pray for the suffering to stop. God's commanding me to pray. So it does not apply to anything going forward. God forbid we should say, oh, it's for my own good. I hope that this, this whatever continues because it's still going to be for my own good. No, right? So I need to understand if I'm going to approach this, and perhaps this is why our community has distanced itself, is because we forgot that these parameters are key. They come with it, right? You can't just go and say, oh, the suffering is for your own good. Generally, it makes no sense. But once I understand, I'm commanded to pray that suffering stops in the future. It's only for myself that I can apply this and not for anyone else. Anyone else, my only role is to say, I'm so sorry it's happening. How can I help? This is terrible. And it only applies to the everyday stuff of life. We're not going to try and look at big tragedies. Okay. Now, and this is not my shtick. This is the traditional way of looking at this, right? I've learned these all from, diehard people that live in the community that live according to this. So this is not my gloss for the front community. This is actually how it's done. If we understand that now, let's look again, right? And what happens to me, I wake up in the morning and I have my story. Oh, poor me. I have this source. I have this trouble. I came from this background. Oh, this happened to me. Oh, I can't get over this, whatever it is. So no, you know what? Every single bit of that was actually positive. Thank God. In fact, it was a help, because here's something we're going to learn, and we'll wrap this up. I thought we'd get to chapter 4, but we'll probably start that next class. When it comes to this polishing of the soul, it's actually quite involved. Okay, we don't realize the half of it. We don't realize the state our souls are in typically, and we also don't realize the stress and the pain it puts the soul through to have to go through this cleansing process. Imagine a very sensitive part of your body, and it has to be operated on. It's very difficult, right? It's very painful, right? We would want an anesthetic. So we're not aware of how profound and how much is going on Yom Kippur when we repair our soul. If we could see it, we'd never have to do tshuva. We'd never do an avera again. But we're given a special opportunity when we're here. Why? Because imagine I had to get to someplace over the ocean. Imagine I had to get to Israel. It was just important that I get there. At some point, I got to get there, right? That's my destination. And I could get there by any means. And I find myself in an airport where there's a counter, and I can just pay however much, and I can get a ticket, and then I can get on a nice, comfortable plane, and we could take off. And in a short 14 hours, I can cross the ocean, and I can sleep, and I can watch movies, and people bring me food, and it's very comfortable. And then we land, and I walk out, and boom, I'm there. That's option A. And option B, imagine later I won't be in an airport, but I still have to get there. So now, who knows? I got to find a way to do it. I got to, I'm going to walk all the way to the shore. I'm going to have to build a boat. I'm going to have to roll across the ocean. I'm going to have to brave dangers, blisters from the sun, and parch. And here I am, I'm crossing, and I finally get to the other side of the ocean, maybe, and then I'm crossing deserts, and there's bandits. Months and months of journeying and of dangers and of pain and blistering and rowing and effort, when I could have just gotten on the plane and flown. Which would you rather do? There's no choice, right? That is what's happening. We don't realize it. That is what's happening when we're here in a body. For reasons that we will explain later on, I have the opportunity to do kapara, to cleanse my soul in a much more powerful way here when I'm in the physical plane than when my soul is back as a soul outside a body. So it's a little like we don't realize right now, being in life, being in the physical body, we are in the airport, and we just pay the money, buy the ticket, and get on the plane. And yeah, it's a little uncomfortable. So I don't wake up in my own bed, but the discomforts are very, very minor. And we accomplish a tremendous amount, right? The journey we need to take to this returning to who we are is accomplished in a very short time, very powerful. We've got these jets that are shooting us. We're flying miles and miles. Well, I don't know how many, a couple miles over the ocean. How high do you fly? We're miles over the ocean, and we travel with great speed. We land, boom, we're there. We can accomplish it all in a day and a half. Where once I'm out of the body, once I'm a soul back in the world of souls, now I'm not in the airport anymore. So there's no ticket I can buy. Now I got to take every step myself. I'm walking across the landscape. I'm building my own boat. I'm crossing the ocean. I'm dealing with all the stress and the hardships. And we call it Gehenna. We call it the scouring of the soul. But the positive is we can accomplish way more here now in a body than we're able to do as a soul. And it's much more painful as a soul. So now look at those bumps and the quote unquote suffering of life. Is it really something negative? Is it really negative that by the little bumps and the little annoyances that I've had in my life, God has powerfully cleansed and washed my soul in a way that I would have to endure so much more if I weren't here in a body? And if I look at it with that genuine eyes, with that genuine perspective, now I'm not just using faith to blindly say, God is good, whatever happened, I'm just going to assert it's good. I can actually be thankful. I can say, wow, if I can even try and picture the journey that I made with that, whatever happened. Okay, so someone called me a name, or I had a negative thing, or someone annoyed me, or whatever it was, I lost something, right? I bought a new thing and I got bumped or torn or bent, and oh, poor me, right? Whatever it is, the headache or whatever, if I can picture how much I've accomplished through that, now I'm starting to feel grateful for that thing. I can actually say, I'm lucky. Lucky is the person that God admonishes here while they're in a body, because that is a ticket that has accomplished so much more than we could outside the body. I got a little smile.
Oh, no, it's very hard to do. It's very hard to say when you have that little bump. Oh, wonderful! I had that bump. It's very hard to do.
It's hard to mean it, but people, what do people say when they hear any news in the Jewish community? Say, thank God, yeah. Thank God, right? So even if there's layers of myself that are not convinced, my soul is convinced at its essence. So you don't have to really become you don't have to become some kind of person that's outside the world, that's not annoyed by life, to still say, thank God, right? I'm going to have that posture. And even if I have that posture just externally, I know that under my consciousness, my soul agrees and it's happening, right? And yeah, there's layers of me that I don't like stubbing my toe. I don't like hitting my shin. I don't like getting sick, God forbid, right? But when I say thank God, and I say it doesn't matter, it's all for the good, I'm connecting to the deepest part of my soul. And the parts of me that don't believe it, those are the fake parts of me. Those are the fake layers that I'm taking away when I do tshuva. Yeah.
Well, a couple things. One is like on the small things, and I've thankfully got to a point where I'm able to, I got a flat tire. Well, two things. One is it's a bump. Two, when I go out and jack up the car, now I've learned a new skill. Next time I got a flat tire, it's a lot easier. I can even help other people. The other thing is, like, Mindy and I have, gone through individually a lot of things in our past that have been very hurtful. But on the other hand, when Mindy sees someone, or I see someone that is in deep trouble, we're compassionate, and sometimes we can even help that person. And then I realized that was probably the polishing. If I was someone that just, let's say, super rich, never had to do a thing in my life, never had any suffering, I would never have been sanded down to the point of having compassion and being able to help because I learned different things in life.
Absolutely. All very true. And we can never know the extent of how some negative is now creating positive, whether it's that the tow truck driver needed the extra $170 for some very important thing, or it's because I become more sensitive. I'll say, I'll just point out, I know that having wealth does not insulate you from having the same kind of sufferings, right? So, just everybody gets it in their own way, but 100%, everything you're saying. Let's finish with a little meditation, just quick.
I think it has to do with the big things versus the little things. What you consider a big thing, what somebody else would consider a big thing, or what you consider a small thing. The fat tire is a small thing, but if it makes you miss an important meeting or hurt somebody else, then it becomes a big thing. So it's kind of a balancing act, isn't it? Yeah,
and each of us is doing this for ourselves. So that's an important point. I shouldn't look at somebody else and say, that's a small thing. Maybe for them it's a huge thing, right? Who knows what they missed, right? So all of this is only each person doing accounting for their own soul, and you cannot take this and apply it to any other person. It is only me for myself, right? A Jew, when I see any suffering in the world, my response is, it's in front of me. There must be some way I can help. Let me help. Oh my gosh, how can I help this, right? But for myself, I can elevate and say, thank God. All right, let's do a little meditation. This is still using our technique we learned from our last class, User's Guide for the Soul. So we're going to take these divine concepts, insert them into our wisdom gateway, and get our emotions connected as well. So just find yourself seated nice and tall. Let your breath start to flow more evenly. Breathing through your nose if that's comfortable. And let's open up our breath to 4 counts for each of the 4 stages of breath. 4 in, 4 holding in, 4 out, 4 staying empty. With me and breathing in, 2, 3, 4. Keep the breath in, 2, 3, and back out, 2, 3, 4, and staying empty, 2, 3, starting over, in, 2, 3, 4, keep it in, back out, 2, 3, 4, empty. You keep that going at your own pace. You might notice that the breath is that first appearance of our soul. So of course it divides into 4 stages, like the 4-letter name of God. Let's open up our wisdom gateway, which is the space between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. In that open, empty space between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath, establish a beautiful, wide-open wisdom gateway. And then let's place in that gateway, if you can picture, Tashuv He, the He will return. That Tshuva means returning the He of God's name. You can see the letters, you can picture the concepts, a nice big screen in your wisdom gateway, moving with sounds nice and close, so you can be right in it. And just see how we have the capacity to reunite God's name for anything that's happened. Let your mind fill with all the details of that divine concept. Tshuva is Tashuv He, the He returning. Notice any emotions of love, awe, compassion for yourself, relief. Notice how this divine concept flows into your emotional body, charging the divine concept with energy. And it's those emotions that will lead to our tshuva going up, doing all the work we need to do this Yom Kippur. Just take a moment and see yourself this Yom Kippur, having reunited God's name, having polished your soul, being back to your true self as a spark of God, continuing this spiraling journey of creating meaning here in our lives. Just enjoy that accomplishment in advance. Recommend some people will meditate for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, even an hour. If you're watching online, feel free to pause your device and stay in this posture. If you're with us, our time is up, so you can open your eyes, wiggle your fingers. Thanks for joining us for Gateway of Atonement. We'd like to welcome you back after Yom Kippur, and Shuvah, really, you have a little extra extension after Yom Kippur. If there's something you missed, you can still keep doing it way until Shmini Atzeret, or some say even until Hanukkah. So we're going to be learning about Shuvah for the months that follow, but the big work is done now. So wishing everybody Ksiva v'Chsima Tova, you should be written and sealed for only the best things in the book of life. And if you're with us at Temple Israel Fly Holidays, I will see you here in person, online, however you're joining us on this journey of Shuvah we're taking together. Thanks.